accessibility within music education. Let's talk about it. During 2020, I have noticed quite a few things, as I think everybody else has. We are in the throes of yet another revolution to equalize the playing field for everybody. Let everybody have a small piece of the pie when there's enough pie to go around for all of us. So I, so after realizing this, what I wanted to do was a project that focused on the accessibility of music education. I chose this topic before the pandemic, and it has become more and more increasingly relevant over the course of writing this capstone, and it's been kind of difficult to get through. So for your viewing pleasure, I would like to submit my research for you. In the 21st century, there are more ways than ever to get connected, yet because of race, gender, physical ability, location, in the 21st century, there are more ways than ever to get educated. Yet because of race, gender, physical and mental ability, location, and finances, the connection of students to music education still has many opportunities for better accessibility. Growing up in a single-parent household, living just under or just at the poverty line, getting music lessons was a privilege I knew well. My dad knew I was a creative human from a very young age and found a way to make music and dance happen for me. I was in lessons by the time I was 5 already. He was able to trade his construction knowledge for lessons most of the time. That's kind of how we got by with things. He did a lot of trading with a lot of really kind-hearted people, and that's how I was able to get my lessons. It's not by any means something that's done all the time. It's not a standard practice, but it is what happened. We usually didn't have the money to make any of those things happen, but with a little creativity, a little kindness to other people, my dad was able to make pretty much anything I wanted to happen. My story is both similar and very different from many folks across the country. In the foreword from the book, How Popular Musicians Learn, A Way Ahead for Music Education, author Lucy Green says this about her own music experience. The formal music education to one of my generation, she was born in 1946, was clear. The music of old, preferably dead, white guys from Europe was the only music to be taken seriously. This is exactly the one thing I have fought against the entire time I have been interested in music. The music I like is far removed from the old, dead European white men I was force-fed in my lessons. With how much music has evolved, specifically during the last 2 decades of the 1900s, why is this still the standard of measure for music education? This question led me to many other questions about exactly how accessible is music education for those who don't happen to fall into the old, dead, white European man category. Why is music education important enough to ask these questions? Well, according to Children's Music Workshop, teaching through the arts motivates children and increases their aptitude for learning. When asking these questions about who has and has had access to formal education, I took some polls of my personal friends, regular people from all across the country, from all walks of life, telling me what their real world problems were with access to music education. The answers I got about access to music education had a few themes. One such theme was location. Many of the people said they lived in smaller towns that at one time had many opportunities for music education, but my friends who were in their 30s said they had problems getting connected to teachers when they were young and now still have difficulty finding teachers for their next generation. Looking at an article written by Catherine Hunt for the Journal of Music Teacher Education, Her research found that larger urban schools have more access to funding for the arts, but less retention, while smaller schools have a much small, I'm sorry, while smaller rural schools have a much higher retention rate for students and teachers. They also have a much smaller budget for the arts, and many times will have to hold fundraisers on their own. Is the higher retention rate because there's a higher rate of change of students in the more urban areas, whereas in rural areas, people tend to stay in one place or one school district for longer amounts of time? You know, this is an area of research that could use quite a bit more exploration and time devoted to how these factors impact the music students in each situation. 2020 has given us access to more possibilities than ever to close the distance gap for lessons. With services like Zoom focusing on bringing business together, musicians are almost able to be in an ideal virtual environment. Because the internet is not a utility just quite yet, this means not everyone will have the same speeds, if any, internet access at all. Is this a perfect solution to the location issue? Not really, but it is a solution. Is this a small step in the direction of connecting music makers all across the world in real time? Absolutely. Here's a short demonstration from my local voice teacher and I testing out Zoom as a possibility. Here's a short demonstration from my local voice teacher and I testing out Zoom as a possibility for a real-time virtual lesson.
Higher. Think
Okay.
vowel again. Let's go back to that exercise with the larynx. So we're going to keep the larynx low with a high E. Oh, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to spin into the song right after we do the exercise. So we're going to keep that pitch. Ya, ya, ja, ja.
Ja, du weißt es, teure Seele, dass ich bin von dir mich will.
Good. Okay, one more time with the nose plug too. Let's add an extra element.
Ja, du weißt es, teure Seele, dass ich will, wo dir mich will.
Nice. Okay, good. Now take that nose plug away. Get the same sensation of the air going behind the nose, because I think there was a tiny bit of air escaping into the nose. And I did hear. And now let's get this text really clean. So speak it as if it's just a German poem.
Ja, du weißt es, teure Seele.
Good, pause. Good. Can you go and sing that with the same pure vowels? I want to hear that.
Okay.
Ja.
Ja, du weißt es, teure Seele.
So much clearer.
Yeah? Okay.
Love it. Yes.
So as you can see, there are a bit of issues. There's some issues still. But I would say that if the future were to move into only virtual lessons and performances, there would be a huge opportunity for someone to create technology to capture every little nuance of the frequencies that make up music. For students and teachers who have worked together before in person, this would be a great opportunity for a distance lesson, as well as a warm-up for a performance, or if either had to be away for some reason. From a teacher's perspective, I would absolutely prefer to have in-person lessons, if at all possible, but would absolutely be open to trying virtual lessons if needed. Some other physical factors that have been seen to hinder or alter accessibility to music education are gender, race, and ethnicity. These are factors completely out of the control of the human who possesses them, yet have led to many missed opportunities in the world of traditional formal music education in the United States. Did you take music appreciation class in elementary, high school, or college? How many times did you see someone born female? How often did you see a person of color? Someone outside of the white, cis, portrayed, heterosexual male form? If your answer is more than maybe once, maybe, then you have a better grasp on diverse music education than most people get in the United States. Women in music education. This is one area where I feel privileged as a student. In most of my formative years, early beginning education, and then again when I got serious about my music as a career, I was fortunate enough to have women as a majority of my teachers and leaders. Even with women in many positions of leadership in my life, I still didn't get much education of women in music throughout my classes. Women, much like in literature and many other facets of culture, seem very erased from traditional music history. I'm sure they were there teaching or performing somewhere, but where are they in the history's text? In the book Women Making Music, Jane Bowers and Judith Tick attempt to explain and correct this issue. The introduction says that the problem is not that we didn't have women in music history, but the historians were asking questions which absolutely exclude women from the findings. Bowers and Tick make the statement that questions should be asked with the socioeconomic standings in mind. And we'll see that theme throughout this entire presentation. Questions should include things like who had access to music education. Bowers and Tick go on to discuss that the majority of music history was written from the documents we had from that time. These documents that survived told a very one-sided history. See, the people who were privileged enough to have their documents published were often the wealthy, those same white, cis, hetero-presenting, often European males we see throughout history. Page 99 of their book goes on to highlight a few women contributors from the mid to late 1500s and shines a spotlight on the fact that the majority of these women were from wealthy families. Later in this presentation, we will explore the privilege of being wealthy and how it can make music more accessible. In addition to the traditional struggle of the gender binary, there are also other problems that fall into the category of gender in the realm of traditional music education. I.e., what about those that don't fall into the gender binary, or maybe don't have the same physical, biological makeup as their gender that they identify with? The National Association of Teachers of Singing has some fantastic information about making your classroom or lessons more inclusive for all gender identities. I will include the link in the supplemental information with this presentation. And all of their inclusive classroom ideas and lessons can be found at that link. Their suggestions are designed for singing. However, they can be easily adapted to suit any classroom needs. A few ways to make everyone feel seen and valid in the learning environment are to ask pronouns and respect them. Remember that not everyone's voice matches their presentation, and that's okay. And also, you want to make sure that you keep communication lines open and easy. Here's where I want to introduce our first interactive piece for this. I want you, from a teacher's perspective, I want you to think about a piece of music, and I want you to think about a student that you'd be teaching this to. As we go along through this presentation, I'm going to have you bring up your imaginary piece of music and kind of scan through it in your mind and find places where maybe, just maybe, this could be a bit more accessible. Up to and including the history of the music, the history of the composer, things like that. You want to make sure that you're really getting things that can speak to a person's experience, to be honest. This would be the first example of that. You want to make sure you have a piece of music that is comfortable for someone's range. And literally everything about accessibility to music education comes down to communication. This entire presentation could be concluded in one sentence, and that is teacher-student communication is the most powerful form of connecting, I think, in all of teaching. But I want you to keep in mind, how would you teach this piece of music for whatever your instrument is for your student? 2020 has been a year of highlighting inequalities. About 2 months ago, the music analyst community on YouTube began looking at the influence of white supremacy on music. Because this is really where my idea for this research started, I've watched many of these videos, At the same time, or at the time of writing this presentation, I realized I was listening to a bunch of young to middle-aged, cis, mostly heterosexual white males explaining racism and music theory, or, and my personal favorite, explaining why music theory is not racist. Because we love to see a Caucasian explain away racism in any community, am I right? Anyway, I once again searched, is music theory racist, through YouTube and was met with 8 of these particular videos on both sides of the aisle before I got to a video by the Graduate Center, CUNY, spotlighting Professor Philip Ewell, speaking about how to make music theory actively anti-racist. Professor Philip Ewell stands in the small handful of Black professors where 96% of professors in his field are white. November 9th, 2019, Professor Ewell gave a speech at the Meet for the Society of Music Theory, where Black people make up roughly 1% of the organization. This is a video anyone in music academia should probably watch. But here is, in my opinion, the most important segment of Professor Ewell's speech. And to be completely honest, this is Professor Ewell's take on colorblind racism. What does music theory have to do with race? He says. This has been a common music theoretical colorblind refrain, which accomplishes 2 goals. It allows the white frame theorist to appear to be on the right side of racism, while allowing the very same racialized structures that were put in place to benefit members of the dominant white race to remain foundational. End quote. This piece of my research honestly needs to be a standalone research project, but my personal observation is the gap between people of color involved in music in real life and the amount of people of color in our documented music history and in higher music education. From a purely pop music perspective, most of the pop music culture is built on cultures of people of color, yet less than 10% of college professors are people of color. This comes from Fast Facts. It will be in my bibliography. Where's the disconnect? At the California State University, Los Angeles, they've attempted to find and solve this disconnect. According to Alan Clements at CSU, CSU has a high concentration of Hispanic students, about 30% of their students, and Asian American and Pacific Islander students, also another 30% of their students. To increase, Alan Clements says, to increase the recruitment of these minorities, John Swain shares 2 strategies. One is the Saturday Conservatory of Music, a weekly program for underprivileged children, which for $40 a quarter provides a student with a semi-private lesson with an instrument specialist, a small ensemble experience, a large ensemble experience in one of 4 orchestras, music theory, and, if the student chooses, vocal training. This is amazing. The other strategy advocated by Swain is to encourage minority students to take advantage of available campus programs, including mentoring, tutoring, and English instruction programs. Another very real reason for inaccessible music education is physical and mental abilities. Very often, teachers are prepared only for students who are not impaired and have very little need for adaptation of a lesson. I want you to take out your mental music that you were preparing for a student. I want you to envision your student to be disabled physically in some way. Maybe their legs aren't long enough to reach the pedals. Maybe they want to play a horn, like a brass instrument, and don't have the physical ability to press the valves correctly. How are you as a teacher going to find ways for your student to succeed? These are the things you have to think about. These are the analyzations as a music educator you have to really be aware of in order to have a proper piece of music for your student, or the accessibility options for the piece of music that you've chosen for your student. I lost my place here, sorry about that. Very often teachers are prepared only for students who are not impaired or have very little need for adaptation of a lesson, like I said earlier. A lot of the pedagogy I've learned has been more centered in preparing for the inclusive and diverse classroom, but not in a way that would benefit those with a physical or mental impairment. How do we include these students in a way that makes learning easiest and best for them? How are many resources online to help teach, there are many resources online to help teach accessibility or teach accessibly. The Macular Society has a great general tip sheet, which I'll include in my supplemental documents, that includes ways to make the classroom more inclusive for students with visual impairments. Some things to think about when you're analyzing a piece of music for a student who may have disabilities or may just need a little extra help to get to their ideal music level. Some things you need to think about: musical ability. Are you giving your student something that's within their musical ability? Does the student need a tablet or phone or computer to see or download the device? Not every student's going to have the luxury of having a device in order to do that. However, is this something maybe you could have during lessons to help facilitate learning of these concepts? Let's see. Does the student need access to a printer to print the music? Physical music, is the text the correct size? Is a braille copy needed? If there is a hearing issue, is there a wearable metronome or something that you could have for your student? You want to think about bench height, pedal height. If you're, a piano teacher, for your specific instrument, you need to think about ways that could be a problem if a student couldn't move or do that particular gesture. So these are all different ways that you can analyze your music for student success. In addition to physical factors that can contribute to the accessibility of music education, accessibility can be affected by how readily accessible time and money are for the student. In a survey of real life people, I found that many of these folks had a problem finding the time in their schedule, or that they didn't have the luxury of some disposable income that would have paid for lessons for them or their student. According to Neighborhood Music School in New Haven, Connecticut, half-hour lessons run $35 to $50, while 45-minute lessons run $50 to $75. This is from my source, How Much? And to be honest, not every student will have the money to have private lessons. There are many, many, many community programs across the country that, and there's too many for me to name here, but there were so many when I looked it up with a quick Google search that there should be no issue connecting students with these programs that have been developed for them to help make music accessible. But there seems to be a disconnect between students and these programs. So at this point, I'm not sure where the disconnect lies, but there has to be a way to get these students connected with these teachers. When I open my studio, I fully intend to start going around to schools and doing presentations, working with local community members, doctors, lawyers, accountants, different people who musicians wouldn't normally need to interact with in order to do their job successfully, but I'd rather have a community of people come together where we can find what's best and then fulfill the needs in the community. Not everybody can afford $75 an hour for a music lesson every week. That runs $300 a month. Not everybody has an extra $300 a month and then some, because then there's still external expenses outside of just your lesson. So basically, in conclusion, what I'd like to say is that music accessibility is something that we absolutely need. Learning music helps kids learn, and there seems to be a disconnect also in our education community in this country. And I believe that music education will be the kind of glue that holds all of that together. I know, speaking from my own personal experience, I was able to push myself harder in school when I knew I had a goal of being able to go to lessons, or when I was in choir, I did much better in school and focused more when I was in choir and in my music lessons. So, and I saw that with a lot of my friends too. A lot of friends that absolutely didn't want to go to school. The only reason they wanted to go to school was to be able to be in the concert that night. I had friends that our choir concert would be on a Friday night or a Thursday night or something, and they would be planning to skip school that day, but if they skipped school, they couldn't do the concert. So it's the small things that keep people motivated and engaged with things that they don't really want to do. Learning isn't always everybody's, thing that really excites them, but music can help make that more within reach. So I just want to thank you so much for listening to my research that I have found, and let's work together to make music education more accessible for everyone. Thank you so much.